It's Sunday, July 9, 2023. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Weekend Show, where we take a deep dive into the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5minutenews. Our guest today is a journalist and former political strategist who founded a network of state and local newsrooms that deliver factual, cultural, and relevant news through a pro-democracy lens to communities who have been left behind by traditional media. It's called Courier Newsroom. Tara McGowan, welcome back to the Weekend Show.
Thanks, Anthony. It's great to be here. It's good to see you.
You and I both started a newsroom, me with 5 Minute News, you with Courier, because we felt that there was despite all of the news networks, there was a gap in the market for factual, truthful, honest reporting. You and I haven't spoken for about 6 months on this show, and yet I still feel like going into the next election, nothing really has changed in that kind of news landscape. And there is still more than ever, in fact, because the threat is the threat of the fascist threat, and the anti-democracy threat is as powerful as ever. So do you really feel, as I do, that, well, this is kind of a loaded question, isn't it? But I feel there's a real need for what we do. Tell me just a little bit more about what you do and why it's so important right now.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And I would say, if things have changed at all, they've changed for the worse since the last that we spoke in the media ecosystem and industry. And, we have seen the major tech and social media platforms like Facebook and YouTube actually roll back their misinformation and disinformation policies that they instituted after the insurrection, which for no good reason. I'm sure we'll talk more about that. In addition, we saw the fallout of the now former head of CNN that was brought on after Jeff Zucker left to try to, I think, bring back both sidesism to the network, right, which blew up in his face quite epically in the ecosystem. And I really do think that the mainstream and traditional media in the United States is having an identity crisis. They are in the midst of an identity crisis. And I think that is long overdue because they haven't actually been serving the public in the ways that they state that they do. Their mission statements they say that they do for a very long time. And that is exactly why I created Courier Newsroom 4 years ago. Why I know you've created 5 Minute News in the Weekend Show is because the vast majority of people are not getting access to good information that is also really relevant to them, that breaks things down in a way that matter to people's lives and that makes sense to people. Increasingly, mainstream media and legacy journalism and outlets in America focus on paying consumers, highly educated, wealthier Americans who often live in cities on the coasts, if you will, because that's how their business models have evolved. And yet that leaves behind millions and millions of Americans who rely on getting their news and information for free, which is increasingly, not increasingly, it just is the way it is today. They're getting it for free scrolling social media and their messaging apps and their email inboxes and their personal friends and networks. And, we have a crisis of trust in this country and abroad as well, that in some ways has been the result of very deliberate campaigns and efforts by the extreme right wing across the world, but also because of the fracturing of media. People don't really know where to look to get trusted information. The decentralization and the explosion of kind of new properties and outlets and platforms across the internet has meant a lot of democratic information consumption. You can choose where you get your information. You can choose who you look to and who you follow and who you trust. But it's also very it's very overwhelming for a lot of people. Something that I love, a personal thing that I really love, is talking to my cab drivers, my Uber and my Lyft drivers when I'm traveling, and consistently all the time it comes up that the information comes up, the news comes up, politics comes up, and they always say, no matter what kind of where they're from, their background, their race, their age, that they don't know who to trust anymore. And that really is because of the failure of the media to continue to evolve and to continue to meet people where they are with good factual information and trusted messengers, and to put that mission ahead of profit, because we do live in a disinformation economy. So that is a very long-winded answer to your question, but I think that there is more than ever a need for more media that takes a different approach, that's much more unapologetic and explicit about the truth and the commitment to the truth and facts, and very explicit about accountability when it comes to extremism, when it comes to bad actors, be them politicians, candidates, organizations, financiers who have agendas that are disingenuous or nefarious, and who manipulate populations in order to advance those agendas through disinformation, misinformation, and hate speech. I think we're just living through that, and there is no one there to save us. We have to just build different models, and that's why you and I are doing what we're doing, I think.
The conversation of the difference between free speech and hate speech, or the line between free speech and hate speech, is the conversation that I'm really keen to have today, because I think I've said before, when I was living in the UK, they've kind of changed some of the rules now, but when I was living in the UK, there was definitive, very clear rules on what is hate speech and what is free speech. And you can't get away with hate speech on social media. If someone complains about you, then, the police are able to investigate it. And it's still a free country, and we still have free speech, and the media is regulated as well. I was on the radio for 20 years, and there are certain things we couldn't talk about. Extreme things like the occult, right? And extreme kind of religious views, because they want you to kind of maintain living in this space that is considered, normalcy. So without extremes. And that's all we're really looking for. Anyone can practice whatever they want to practice, but it's that line between what is considered socially acceptable and when you go out to those extremes. And I just don't think these days, because of the proliferation of news or user-generated content, or the fact that people can go looking for the news that they want, that there is no kind of natural barometer of what is true, what is untrue, and even what is considered normal discourse versus extreme.
I think that's right. And honestly, this is a murky topic, right? And I am not a lawyer, but I'm a citizen and a patriot and an activist who very much believes in free speech and believes in the power of that, and that is core to democracy and democratic values and democratic states. And so it is imperative that we maintain free speech, but not at the cost of people's safety or lives. I think that's a pretty good line to draw that I think most people would get around. And that's where hate speech comes into play, because it puts people's lives at direct threat. It does lead to violence. It does lead to political violence. It leads to other violence. It leads to alienation and discrimination that makes its way into laws and institutions and things of that nature. This is why we have government, right? This is why we have civil society, and why we have a democratic government, is to be able to establish and reinforce norms for a healthy, productive society. And so I think that what's challenging is that our institutions and our government bodies in the states and in many countries abroad have not been able to keep up with the pace of technological innovation. Right? It was much, much, much slower in terms of the evolution from the printing press into the radio, into the television, into the internet.
People watched it together as well. Like, you would sit down and watch the nightly news, and Walter Cronkite's voice or whoever was a fixture. And so everybody, if you met the guy at work the next day, or a guy at work the next day, he would have watched the same news as you the night before. So you were able to have a conversation about the news, and the news was only a few things that everybody was talking about. Now the news is everywhere.
That's right. And I think about this a lot, because I worked in traditional broadcast journalism at CBS, one of the oldest networks, and I worked at 60 Minutes, and I actually met Don Hewitt, and I studied the start of broadcast journalism and radio in this country in school. I'm a student of it, and of Marshall McLuhan's communication theory and everything. And yet it's interesting, because there was a shared understanding of the world and news, and a shared sense of truth and facts. But I want to be clear that that wasn't perfect either, right? That was also flawed. And so I am a believer in the democratization of information and more diverse voices and platforms, because there were very few people who were very homogeneous deciding what was news at that point in time. So it was flawed. I think that we are on a better path, but the challenge really is regulation has to keep up. Education, awareness, regulation, implementation, enforcement of regulation in order to be able to maintain those norms for a healthy civic society is critical. And that's where we have fallen short as a country. And the media industry certainly has not self-policed. The technology industry in this country is not self-regulating in an effective way. And this is, again, a reason why we need effective government and leadership. And it's hard. It's a tough conversation to have, because I am an eternal optimist. I am a problem solver. I like to take big, gnarly problems and try to solve them and innovate. And yet a lot of times the buck stops with me in terms of how we're really going to solve this crisis, with having leaders who have the political will to actually take these challenges on and do right by society by actually enforcing them and not letting the powerful lobbyists and big money behind these massive corporations and the people that run them be able to run the show. That's what's happening right now. Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, these are incredibly powerful people, and they wield that power because they know how much power they have. And that is where we don't have a true democratic system right now. And that's why we are lacking the regulation to be able to actually enforce against hate speech and be able to still protect and preserve free speech in America.
But the difference with America versus, say, Europe is this little thing called the First Amendment, right? Which people keep throwing back at you. And so therefore, even Joe Biden could never say, well, yes, I'm a believer in the First Amendment, but ... It's like people are so desperate. It's a little bit like, you know, the gun debate. You know, it's like to people that are, you know, pro gun ownership, it's about all guns, not some guns or train. It's like, you're trying to take all my guns away. And it's the same with free speech. You're trying to take away all my free speech. And this is such a nuanced subject, both in terms of news and information and firearms. It's so nuanced. And people don't seem to want to have the time to even go deep enough with this conversation. And I want to bring two examples to our discussion. One is the fact that our elected representatives and former elected representatives have become radicalized themselves. So, you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene was thrown out of the Freedom Caucus a few days ago, right?
Wild.
She is effectively the deputy speaker of the House of Representatives now. She wields huge power. She got thrown out of what is an extremist group within the House because she's a different type of extremist, you know? And so this kind of infighting is going on. So that's one example. And another example is the disgraced former president, Donald Trump, who on his platform, which he created, I mean, even there's a whole other conversation, but he posted what he claimed was the home address of the former president, Barack Obama. And then a guy with guns in his van was arrested near the property. I mean, it's like the former president posts this, and a guy goes there with multiple weapons in his van with a plan.
And does the former president have any remorse over that? Or was that not the intention?
Well, this is it. And also the media coverage of this has been not silent. Obviously, it got covered. They mentioned it. But think about how significant a crime this is. The former president publishes what he claimed was the address. Someone goes to it with weapons, obviously intending to kill. Same thing happened to Paul Pelosi, of course. You know, similar situation, right? The guy that went in there and smacked him over the head with a hammer was a far-right operative who'd taken all of his instruction from the media.
Well, and those
this is going to keep happening, Tara.
And those are the high profile ones, Anthony, because it's also happened to poll workers across this country. It's happened to election administrators. I just read a really upsetting story about a meteorologist, a local news meteorologist in Iowa who resigned because of death threats because he was talking about climate change. From climate deniers online. This is also, we need to be very, very clear and explicit about the fact that this is the intention of the people.
It's no accident.
This is not an accident. This is absolutely exactly what they are trying to do. They are trying to incite anger and emotion and rage and hostility and violence, because that is how they build and maintain and steward loyalty. And loyalty is what they need in order to secure their place in power, in order to be able to grow and seize and attain more power. And so this is, the thing is, when it comes to like true believers on anything, whether it is the right to bear arms or, you know, the right to free speech or the right to freedom of religion, et cetera, or the right to believe in things like, somebody doesn't believe in abortion, things of this nature, right? I have so much respect for people that are true believers, that have studied things, that have values, that live those values. And yet where I really, really struggle is hypocrisy. And when you hear from people about these arguments about the guns or about these or about life or quote unquote pro-life, et cetera, and yet those are the same folks that then do not support policies to support mothers or to support children or paid leave or education in this country. Or if you believe in the right to bear arms, but you also, believe in, you're against big corporations when it's a corporate lobby that protects the guns and feeds you the information that fires you up. It's very difficult because people are animated because there are forces, there are organizations, there are individuals, there are leaders in this country who animate them very intentionally around emotional knee-jerk issues that they have emotional connection to in order to weaponize that. And so this is where there's got to be accountability. And I think one of the things that I actually was really, really heartened by and still am, because I think it's creating a permission structure for more of this, it's creating a good precedent, is the very successful, in my opinion, defamation suits. First by against Fox News that ended in a massive settlement, and also Alex Jones last year, where the parents of the children that were absolutely slaughtered by gun violence in Sandy Hook Elementary School they sued him for defamation because he claimed that it was a conspiracy.
But look who's taking out these lawsuits, right?
Absolutely.
It's not the government. In the case of the Fox News one, it was the voting machines company, right?
Yes.
They a private company who had been defamed had to basically do the job of regulators by going in to Fox and saying, "You've defamed us. Dominion voting machines work just fine in every other country," and sued them for a record amount. And the same with Alex Jones. It's like parents of deceased children having to come together to do this because no one is doing it on their behalf.
That's right.
And that is why we have a problem of having the likes of the former president claiming he wants to deregulate everything and that deregulation is amazing. I mean, look what, look at the submersible. That if there were some regulations involved there, then 5 people wouldn't be dead right now.
Right.
It's not complicated.
No, it's not. But this is, it also gets back to the fact that we have extremists in our government in the United States who are literally not doing their jobs as representatives of their constituents. The majority of Americans support much, much, much more extreme gun control measures than we have in place in this country. They support, over 70% of Americans support some level of access to abortion in this country. We have an extremist group of lawmakers that have attained power in the House of Representatives and in state houses across this country who are not representing the issues and the concerns and the policies of their constituents. That this is where democracy falls apart for me, right? Is like we have elected officials who were elected, right? And then they are not doing their jobs to represent the beliefs and the desires and the needs and concerns of their constituents.
Because they have their own agenda.
That's
so
exactly
once they're
right,
in, they'll say whatever they have to say to get elected. And then once they're in, because let's not forget, Marjorie Taylor Greene's been thrown out of the Freedom Caucus because she had a row with Lauren Boebert on the House floor about who was going to be first to impeach Joe Biden, the current president. I mean, it's like, you couldn't make this stuff up, Tara.
I know, and that's also a challenge because it becomes theater. It becomes entertainment, and that drives clicks and engagement. And believe me, I love to read an article about Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert calling each other the B word on the House floor. And yet, at the same time, that's really dangerous because this is our government. These are our elected officials. The stakes are so high. Their jobs are so important to be able to actually solve the problems that face the American people. And this is also why we have such apathy in this country and such disengagement and frankly, dissociation with civic participation in our government, which is really dangerous, especially among younger generations. Gen Z is an outlier, and I want to talk about them because I think they are my greatest source of hope. But truly, this is the challenge, is that there are people who have made a mockery of our government and our democracy, who hold these seats in office and who hold hostage the rights and the ability for us to progress as a nation one way or another. And they have eliminated the ability for really, really, really just decent human discourse and debate over how to solve problems. And that pushes a lot of people out of the process and the system because they're like, well, why? None of this relates to
but there is no debate.
Corrupt.
Yeah. I hear nothing. I would love to be able to see and watch and listen to debate on Capitol Hill, but I don't know where to find it. I mean, the UK has a bit of a bad name because our debate is like at the very next level. I mean, it's literally like, monkeys in a zoo waving their papers and screaming at each other. But at least it forms a part of the functioning democracy. And I think the opposition, which is currently Labour in the UK, because the UK has had 14 years of austerity under the Conservatives now, Labour know that their job, even though they are unelected, is to be a healthy opposition. And so they take their job very seriously. It's not just electioneering. It's holding the government to account. And this is the problem with the American system, is that, Marjorie Taylor Greene's job is to make sure that the three branches of government are balanced and functioning and take the responsibility on that, okay, I'm elected, I'm in the House now, I have responsibilities. It becomes anything you can do to kind of bring the other team down. Even if there is some positive news, it's like they don't care, they'll spin it. And so it's just every man for himself. They're enemies. The political parties are enemies. And they're supposed to be, with a two-party system, are actually supposed to run the country together.
Yeah,
you can't do that.
This reminds me of a new freshman Democrat in the House, Jeff Jackson from North Carolina, who is an incredible communicator. He makes these amazing videos for social media, breaking down complicated issues, bringing his constituents and the rest of the country who pays attention along with him to break down what his role is and what's happening. And he made a video not so long ago about how different so many of his colleagues on the right were when the cameras were on versus when there were closed door conversations. They were actually much more rational and civil without the cameras on. And this also gets to social media, frankly, and the media generally being a source for enabling this bad behavior in a lot of ways, because a lot of it, honestly, at a human level, it's ego-driven. They know that they're going to get more engagement. They're going to get more followers. They're going to be able to raise more dollars. They're going to be able to build bigger platforms, get bigger speaking engagements, get bigger contracts when they're out of government and their revolving door. All of this is about it's all self-involved in a lot of ways to the detriment of our country and our democracy and our citizens.
which is why some of them just don't leave. I mean, they do it for life. And, the Chuck Grassleys or the Dianne Feinsteins, people who should have hung up their hat years ago. There is this desire to kind of hang on and just keep going, and it's really unhealthy. And those are two, opposing parties.
But it's a tale as old as time, right? Yeah. Holding on to power, greed. It's part of the human condition. We're not going to have a solution for that, but we should actually have, a ball in terms of who our elected officials are and how they represent, because we've come so far away from the real essence of what this work is, to be a public servant in our democracy.
We have to take a quick break for our sponsor, but I want to come back and talk to you about Mums for Liberty next on The Weekend Show. Maybe you're like me and you sometimes struggle with what to wear, finding pieces that go together, and the hassle maybe of changing clothes for different activities. Well, Rhone's Commuter Collection is the most comfortable, breathable and flexible set of products. Commuter Collection offers the world's most comfortable clothes. You never have to worry about what to wear when you have the Rhone Commuter Collection. And with Rhone's wrinkle release technology, wrinkles disappear as you stretch and wear the products. With Gold Fusion anti-odor technology, you'll be smelling fresh and clean all day long. And on top of that, Rhone is 100% machine washable, so you can ditch the dry cleaner altogether. I personally love feeling fresh. I love a technical fabric, and that makes me kind of confident knowing that the clothes are looking after themselves. Well, the Commuter Collection can get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. Head to rhone.com/weekendshow and use promo code weekendshow to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to Rhone, RHONE.com/weekendshow and use code weekendshow. It's time to find your corner office comfort. Green Chef is the #1 meal kit for eating clean. Feel your best with delicious, nutritionist-approved recipes featuring clean ingredients with no artificial colours, sweeteners, high fructose corn syrup, and limited added sugar and limited processed ingredients. Choose from recipes featuring lean proteins like turkey, sockeye salmon, barramundi, tilapia, scallops and shrimp, certified organic whole fruits and vegetables, organic cage-free eggs, and plenty of whole grain options. Eat clean the easy way with recipes that help manage your weight and support your wellness goals without skimping on flavour. Feel your best this summer with seasonal recipes featuring certified organic fruits and vegetables, organic cage-free eggs, and sustainably sourced seafood. Also, Green Chef is the only meal kit that is both carbon and plastic offset. Green Chef offsets 100% of their delivery emissions to your door, as well as 100% of the plastic in every box. Plus, nearly all packaging materials are curbside recyclables in most areas in the US. Green Chef delivers everything you need to eat clean the easy way this summer. Feel your best with nutritionist-approved recipes packed with clean ingredients that support your healthy lifestyle and taste great too. I love Green Chef. My absolute favorite is the spicy chicken and broccoli stir fry. It's delicious. Go to greenchef.com/weekendshow50 and use code weekendshow50 to get 50% off plus free shipping. That's greenchef.com/weekendshow50 and use code weekendshow50 to get 50% off plus free shipping. Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well. It's The Weekend Show. We're back with Tara McGowan, and I want to talk about the way ABC News handled the story this last week. They tweeted with a picture of the two founders of Mums for Liberty in Philadelphia. It said, "These mums call themselves joyful warriors, but they're mad at teachers, principals, and the president, and they're fighting back." And then they wrote a whole connected, linked article talking about it was formed just 2 years ago in Florida. It's since branched out nationwide. Say they're mad at teachers, their principals, their president, and now as they see it, they're fighting back through school boards, local elections, and if they get their way, their next president. Now, and you don't have to kind of dig too deep to find out what Mums for Liberty is really about, right? It's a bit of a smokescreen organization. CRT is not being taught in schools. There isn't this kind of, the trans issue is not an issue. These are things that are, tiny little moments that have been blown up into propaganda to enable Mums for Liberty to push their agenda of far-right Christian nationalism, to get Christianity back into schools, and to basically, get rid of any kind of progressive or liberal thinking in the education space. There was no mention of that from ABC News. Nothing. They completely legitimized this organization. I should say they have since deleted that tweet, but the article is still up. They just changed the headline a little bit. I mean, ABC News is a legacy, news organization. It's owned by Disney now. And as we know, Disney, I'm sure, would not support Mums for Liberty, as we've seen with their feud with Ron DeSantis in Florida. Well, what do you make of this? And how do we go forward if mainstream media organizations like ABC News are dropping the ball regarding the rise of fascism?
It's an excellent question. ABC News and many, many other news outlets I have seen have absolutely engaged in malpractice in their journalism when it comes to coverage of Moms for Liberty and other similar organizations. So I was not surprised to see that. I was actually I was heartened to see that there was a lot of immediate response from media commentary and opinion writers and other folks on social media.
But nothing from ABC News. I mean, they didn't put out a statement.
No, of course not, because they stand by their story, right? And it's a really good story. I actually think that The Truth is a better story, that this is an incredibly well-organized, well-financed network of operatives who have taken a ideology, essentially, a social agenda that they have, constructed false, inaccurate conspiracies and allegations, and waged a campaign to make it look like a grassroots effort of just concerned moms across the country, when they are backed by people like Leonard Leo, who inherited over $1 billion to fund extreme right-wing things and essentially rigged our Supreme Court in this country. And he is a backer of Moms for Liberty. So these are the things that I actually think are way sexier for reporters to be talking about. And yet ABC conveniently left them out of this story. There was a lot of good follow-up, though. Moms for Liberty had their national conference in Philadelphia last weekend, and NBC, another major network, did actually report on one of their training sessions that they gave at that, which was, quote unquote, mastering the spin, which was training their moms, their organizers across this country, on how to manipulate the media. And I actually wrote these down because I thought this was so important, because this is exactly who Moms for Liberty is. They train their organizers to never apologize for mistakes, to target their opponents relentlessly, and to always maintain paranoia about the media. That one sound familiar? Fake news media, we hear that from all of the extreme right, including President Trump, all of the time when he was president and since. And the one that really just unnerved me so much, I mean, they all do, but was the never apologize for mistakes, because in the training, one of the co-founders' husband was the one giving this training, and he is the chairman of the Republican Party in Florida. And the example that he cited was he shamed on stage a local Moms for Liberty group for apologizing after they used a quote from Hitler in one of their newsletters. Saying that apologizing makes you weak. And this is, I mean, this is what, these are not moms that are just upset and they're going to their school boards and they're like, I want to know what you're teaching my kids. This is a very well organized political organization that seeks to, they have a much more extreme and dangerous agenda than the one that they have fabricated and claimed.
But they don't even have kids in public school, Tara. I mean, this is the thing. They're all homeschooling their children, because this Christian nationalist homeschooling movement is a huge thing where they can indoctrinate their kids. But what they want to do is have that happen in the public schools.
Absolutely.
And is it Oklahoma, I think, where they have, the first school that has now funded a Christian school with public
That's right.
money?
Well, one of the organization's stated objectives is the abolition of the Department of Education in America.
Yeah.
I mean, they're being incredibly transparent about this. That's why it's true malpractice on the reporting side to not actually talk about the true intentions and backing and agenda of these organizations, because that's where they gain their power, is this, and this false legitimacy is relying on the media to describe them the way they want to be described, which is just concerned parents. And I'm not saying some of them aren't concerned parents, but this is a very, very, very well organized, well orchestrated effort to be able to advance a very extremist social agenda in education in America.
So what's the deal with ABC News then? I mean, is it just a rogue reporter? Is it a diktat from fascist leadership? I mean, how does it happen that a legacy news organization would, allow that to kind of get out and wait 2 days before they delete the tweet?
I don't unfortunately know the answer to that. I do know that Disney that owns ABC News actually just cut a huge amount of the ABC News division, if not the entire division, in terms of jobs recently. So I don't know if it's a freelancer. I don't know who this person is. I don't think ABC News is going to be
But it generates conspiracy theories, doesn't it? And this is the problem. It's like, unless they deal with it, unless they say how it happened and why it happened and how they don't intend for it to happen again, there will be a conspiracy, and it plays into the far right, who are, have their own theories about the media and who owns it and what, and this is also a kind of new problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I will say, I think, whatever the communications objectives of Moms for Liberty in engaging in that article and interview were, kind of blew up in their face, because I think the backlash got much more attention, frankly, at least in, our circles and news feeds than the original article. But it's true. I mean, they are able to manipulate the media. It's one of their stated goals, and that's what occurred in that article. I think it's just one of these stories where we actually have to get the truth out there. We have to, this is true with also any disinformation spreader. I do trainings all the time on countering disinformation. And you have to be able to tell people the real incentives and motivations of the people that are spreading conspiracy theories or lies or disinformation intentionally. What is their agenda? What is their objective? What is their desired outcome? Who is resourcing them? Because that matters. And this is, again, the stuff that Moms for Liberty, they are not an organic group of moms. They have a political agenda. They have a social agenda, and they have spread a number of lies. They have sowed division and hate. They stand against LGBTQ plus communities and children. And there really are a hate group. And just, I think it was last week or the week before, the Southern Poverty Law Center in the country actually classified them as an extremist organization in this country.
Yeah, that's right. So if I was to play devil's advocate just for a moment, here's a kind of counter argument, right? If there are people who claim to have these views, such as Mums for Liberty, and Donald Trump supports them, and, he got up on stage and was very, supportive and positive about them, and 70-odd million people voted for Donald Trump, is it all connected? Is there an argument to say, well, this is just the view of the right now, and therefore you shouldn't silence it, and it's a legitimate view? Because, this is where the nuance has to come in, where we are not represented, with the Electoral College and the way that voting works. And it's like the popular vote and how many people actually hold these views. And is it just the leadership that hold the views? And is it the hate groups that make more noise than the average voter who doesn't have a voice at all? There's a whole lot to unpack here. But my point is that their angle and their argument is going to say, but look, there's a whole lot of us, half the country, they'll keep saying. And therefore, why should half the country not be allowed to hold these views?
This is such a good and loaded question, because this is what we were getting at before about representation, right? A very small minority of extremists can be much louder than the majority, and the way that the media then absolutely amplifies their agenda because they are loud, because they are aggressive, because they are relentless, makes it so the perception changes to make them think that they are a larger group. They are a more powerful bloc of voters in this country than they are. I mean, this is the conundrum of today's Republican Party in America. Their hands are tied around extremist policies and conspiracy theories that I think a lot of them do not believe at all. And behind closed doors are putting their head in their hands about how did we get here? And yet they will do anything to be able to wield power. And so, this, because what you just described with book banning and their sort of stance on education in this country, you could say the same thing about abortion. They went too far, right? Federalist Society, extremist Supreme Court that we now have, the majority of the Supreme Court in this country, is making decisions out of lockstep with the majority of this country. And so that's, again, where we've got to figure out where facts come into play again, where support is around issues compared against where the few individuals who hold outsized power are and what they're doing with that power. That is the divide. That is what is going to break our democracy, because it is not a true democracy if we do not have representatives who are representing where people in this country are. And that's the other problem, because the polarization in this country is based on a lot of bullshit. Excuse my French. Mm-hmm. It isn't like most people actually agree on most things. We're
the same. We're all the same. Yeah,
absolutely.
And it's such a waste of time. I mean, the whole thing is like, it's a miscommunication. You've got millions of people miscommunicating with each other, even in same families where they're at loggerheads because of, the Trump distraction, where it's split families up. But actually, fundamentally, people all have the same progressive views because we live in a world that is suffering. It's like climate change isn't exclusive to one country. Now, this is a world problem, and yet for some reason, by politicizing and weaponizing issues on the ground, it's turned people against each other who actually have inside them the same view.
Absolutely, and I wouldn't even go so far to call them progressive views. I would just say compassion. Right? For people to live their lives, for people to be able to have jobs and afford to be able to give their children good life. Like, everybody wants that. Nobody wants their kid to be murdered in their classroom, right? Whether they agree or disagree on gun policy.
But maybe some do. I mean, maybe there is a lack of compassion. Maybe that is the problem. Because I can't get my head around the parents of people who have children who are so pro-gun that they are prepared to let a few kids get slaughtered. They've said it out loud. It's worth it. We've heard them say it. It's worth a few kids getting slaughtered for us to be able to own guns. So maybe the compassion argument also is either flawed or nuanced or both, because, there's just two Americas, as I see it. There's two Americas. I don't know what the percentages are, but there is definitely a group who are just full of hate and anger and disassociation and dissatisfaction. It's not 50%.
It's not 50%.
It's not even 30%. It might be 5%.
I was going to say it's not 50% of this country. It's not 25% of this country. The problem is, and this is where I run the risk of sounding very Pollyannish, but I am an optimist. You have to be to do this work. Otherwise, God, I'd do anything else. But I have such compassion for so many of these people because they have been manipulated. They have had their emotional vulnerability, their fears, their insecurities, their rightful anger about working and not being able to get ahead, by never feeling like they can do enough, by feeling like nothing is actually helping them. Other people are getting an easier way out. Like, these are real, true things that people feel and experience in their lives. And the horrific part of this is that there are bad actors that see that and they wield it. They go in and they find that emotional cord and they tell them a story that is not true of who to blame because they are angry or they are fearful. And they point that fear and that anger at someone or something that is not responsible for it in order to advance their own agenda and political.
But there's always been a victim through history.
They are victims in a lot of ways. And this is where I really do have compassion, and they really do everybody wants to feel a part of a community, right? That is so central to who we are as humans, and to feel like part of something bigger. And they have created these false movements based on false premises that make people true. The thing that is true about them is that people feel they are in community. They feel that they are fighting for something that is going to give them a better outcome.
Yeah.
And they have been deceived. And that's what makes me so upset and so angry at these people, is that they have wielded the most vulnerable people in vulnerable states to be able to advance things that are only going to hurt those people.
That's right.
And so
it's always the poorest people that are donating, right? It's always the people with the least money who are giving their last dime to the Trump campaign, you know? And it's and I've struggled to kind of articulate how I feel about this, but what it boils down to is that if you were to lay it all out in a spreadsheet, not that anybody would take any interest in the spreadsheet apart from you and me, but if you were to lay it out in a spreadsheet, Republican voters over the last 30 years at least have not benefited from voting Republican. They just haven't. It's like the trickle-down economics, which is another conversation that's going on at the moment. It's like none of it benefits them. And so they are basically funding an extremist party now that does not seek to serve them. And I don't really know how to communicate that.
It's incredibly difficult because change is slow and iterative, and it's made much slower when we keep going in reverse and rolling back policies.
Yeah.
And so it's very easy to always, it's the same. I mean, I worked in politics for a dozen years, and it is incredibly difficult to get people to vote to keep things going where they're going, because it never feels like it's going fast enough or things are going well enough, right? It's another part of living, right? Things are not black and white. They are gray, and and things take time. And yet we have made enormous progress when you look back at history, and you can see the seething anger of the extremists on the other side, that really most of it is based in Christian ideology. It is mostly based in religious ideology. When we live in a country that prides itself, I'm sitting in Rhode Island right now, the state that essentially advanced freedom of religion in this country. This exists, and they are fighting to go back to a place and a time where they felt safe, and that made them feel like they had more opportunity right now. And it is it's the opposite of abundance, right? It's a scarcity complex. And extremists and bad actors feed that scarcity complex to create this division. And I really do believe if more people understood the incentives and the objectives of these efforts and these individuals, they wouldn't be able to be duped as much as they are. And unfortunately, the left plays right into this two Americas debate.
Yes.
They don't do themselves any favors here, even though the definition of progressives is to want to progress. And as a progressive person, I want everyone to have the ability to choose how to raise their children, what school that they should go to, what religion they practice in their homes. But you should not be able to determine what other people, your neighbors, do, how they raise their children, etc. And I think that that's, again, where they have weaponized this to make them feel empowered, that they're the ones fighting for liberty and freedom, when they're using them as weapons and pawns to fight for the opposite, to fight for control. Like Moms for Liberty, what they really want as the outcome is not all of these book banned. They want abstinence education. They want Christian literature.
Yeah, they don't want the Bible banned. I mean, the Bible arguably has got way more bad stuff. They want a morning
prayer next to the Pledge of Allegiance. They are fighting to bring church and state back together. And I think too often Democrats and progressives on the left are always put in this defensive posture where they're just like, we can't ban these books, we need history, et cetera. And yes, that is all true. But also we have to be saying what they're doing, what their agenda is.
Right.
Because they have put them in a corner. And that's where, I don't see efforts as well resourced, frankly, on the side of true parents' rights about children getting a factual education and an understanding of history in this country that is as active, as loud, and frankly, as effective right now as groups like Moms for Liberty are.
Well, their long-term view is that they're trying to create like mini far-right Republican voters, right? So they're wanting to groom their own children
That's exactly right.
to be exactly what it is that they're doing. And the other thing I wanted to say to you is I've never really heard the media, whether it be mainstream or legacy or whatever, say stuff like Republican women might need an abortion someday too.
No, they don't say it
Never
out
heard
loud. But many, many, many Republican women across this country have had abortions,
Yeah.
are having
Right.
abortions, and will continue to
Yeah.
have abortions.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a conversation that is never had. It's almost like, as you say, the mistake of referring to two Americas, and I will make the effort to stop saying that and try and talk about the fact that we are all connected and we are all the same, and that there is a faction that is causing all of the disinformation and all of the division. And actually it is not the majority. But, you know, they're very good. Like Trump says, everyone says. He means he says. He says.
Absolutely.
And again, these tactics are not employed by the left. They just hope that the world will remain together, and actually the right are pushing to break it. They want it broken. And the divisiveness it's so interesting to me, because in where I'm from, the left and the right is so subtle. Less so now, actually, but when I was living there, it was so subtle.
I mean, I'm in my 30s, and I can remember a time when it was subtle in America. It didn't feel subtle at the time, right? I mean, I worked like hell to make sure that Barack Obama was reelected and Mitt Romney wasn't made president. But right now, we'd be like, oh, Mitt, yeah, you're probably on our team in a lot of ways, even though I disagree with you fundamentally on issues. I have so many more friends. I just spoke to my friend Joe Walsh, who's a Tea Party Republican, who is absolutely for democracy and against the extremism. And we've become friends because we share these common values, that we want a functional democracy in this country. And we want human rights. And we do want a separation of church and state. And we do want freedom of religion and freedom of speech and freedom of choice and all of these things. And I think, you know, to quote my former boss, there are no red states and blue states. There are United States of America, but there are very powerful, very dangerous factions that understand how to wield the media, how to wield information ecosystems, how to make a very, very small, rabid minority have immense power in Congress in Washington. They want the White House back. They had it at one point in time. And so I do want to make one kind of inside baseball from my political days point about this, which is that, you know, there are more people that share all of the same values, but because of the electoral college system in America, and because of the billions of dollars that are spent on elections, because we do not have campaign finance reform in this country, that small minority does have outsized political power in our democracy. Yeah. They do. Yeah. They literally do. It is a fact. It is math. And if we did not have the electoral college and all states were treated equally, and it was the popular vote, a Republican would not have won the presidential election in this country in my lifetime. And so it is that is just such an important point, because it is how a radical minority can have outsized power and influence over the direction of our society in America.
And despite all of this, I read yesterday that the Trump campaign has had a record fundraising quarter, like record
$35 million. Trump raised.
Yeah.
Much of it after his indictments were announced.
I know. It's like a badge of honor. I don't get it, but I'm trying to get it. Okay, we'll come back. I want to talk about Elon Musk versus Mark Zuckerberg and the downfall of Twitter and the rise of Threads in just a moment. Did you know that your temperature at night can have one of the greatest impacts on your sleep quality? If you wake up too hot or too cold, I highly recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. Inspired by NASA, Miracle Made uses silver-infused fabrics and makes temperature-regulating bedding, so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. Using silver-infused fabrics originally inspired by NASA, Miracle Made sheets are thermoregulating and designed to keep you at the perfect temperature all night long, so you get a better sleep every night. These sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresh 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odours. Miracle sheets are luxuriously comfortable, without the high price tag of other luxury brands, and feel as nice, if not nicer, than bed sheets used by some 5-star hotels. Stop sleeping on bacteria. Bacteria can clog your pores, causing breakouts and acne. Sleep clean with Miracle. Go to trymiracle.com/weekend to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code WEEKEND at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/weekend and use the code WEEKEND to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. That's trymiracle.com/weekend to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. We're back with Tara McGowan, creator of Courier Newsroom, founder of Courier Newsroom, and I'm Anthony Davis, creator and founder of 5 Minute News. It's like the journalist's journalist having a conversation here, so thank you very much for joining us. I've been on Twitter ever since the radio station that I used to work for had a late-night political talk show for years, and they said, you need to go on this thing called Twitter, and I'm like, no, don't make me, and here we are, I don't know 15 years later, and my blue check got taken away recently.
Mine
Very proud of that.
Mine too. Cheers.
Right? Not paying for a new one. And, Elon Musk bought Twitter, paid $44 billion. It's not worth even a third of that now. You don't spend that kind of money on a platform claiming that you're going to liberate it and bring free speech back to it, fire all the people that were looking carefully at hate speech and regulation, unless you have a political agenda. So let's just talk about the Musk aspect first before we talk about the Zuckerberg response, because Elon Musk has had enough time now since he bought it to get his house in order, right? He's made changes. I mean, last week, none of us could tweet. We were getting this rate limit exceeded message, and everybody thought that was the end of it, and it had finally crashed and burned, and then the next day it was kind of back up again. We all had egg on our faces, but, Musk is absolutely, either not paying his bills or he's messing around with it on purpose. There's a huge agenda there, and he's now furious about this new Meta-owned platform. Tell us what you feel about all of this.
I feel so many things about all of this. So when Musk purchased Twitter and took it over, I very quickly stopped using the platform as often. I became more of a voyeur than a tweeter, and I sort of weaned myself off of it. So I didn't even encounter the rate limit because I wasn't tweeting. But I was dabbling in the alternatives, and I wasn't happy with any of, or not happy, but I didn't adopt any of them. They were all a little bit clunky in my opinion. And I do think Twitter is a really valuable and powerful platform. And I also believe that it doesn't have to be Twitter. And Zuckerberg's very, very, very savvy rollout this past week of Threads demonstrated that, because it was adopted by 30 million people in 24 hours, downloaded the app. It had enormous advantages that some of the other competitors did not have. And yet I also have a very icky feeling in my stomach as somebody who is very outspoken about Zuckerberg as being not good for our democracy, and not the patriot that I wish that he would be, or that he claims to be, in terms of how he has managed his massive, massive empire of companies that hold the vast majority of American and people around the world's data, and now even more so, including more of my own. I do believe that he will charge all of us for AI of our brains at some point in the not too distant future, because of what he's sitting on. And yet he created a very, very elegant platform and experience that takes the best of Twitter and immediately onboards all of your friends and familiar faces who follow you on Instagram, and just nobody else could have done it but Zuckerberg. So, kudos to him on that. And yet let's all be very, very, very clear-eyed that this platform is going to have all of the same ills that all of Zuckerberg's other platforms have had when it comes to not regulating or enforcing regulation on disinformation and misinformation that leads to real world harm. So
Did you have what I experienced, which I call I had a Bush moment, which is that I used to hate George Bush so much because of the Iraq War. And then Trump came along and became the worst president in history. And suddenly George Bush seemed kind of okay.
That's exactly what it is.
And this is how I feel with Zuckerberg. Like, I hated Zuckerberg with a passion. I never joined Facebook. And then Elon turns from a goodie with like electric cars and solar to a baddie by buying Twitter and upending it and suddenly giving license to all this hate speech. So I'm like not into him anymore. And suddenly Zuckerberg like, not so bad after all. I mean, like, these people are really messing with me.
Yeah, that's exactly what I tweeted. I said, it's the devil. We just chose the devil we know. And honestly, that is how I feel, is that I would prefer the devil I know with Zuckerberg to Elon Musk, because I mean, I don't think either of them stands for anything but themselves and their own personal gain and wealth. I really do believe that. And however, they can do brand repair. I don't think it's funny. Musk is not interested in that at all. Neither one of them is really responsive to public pressure or PR. And yet they are responsive to, like, this was truly, he threatened a cage fight, right? With like, this is what it was. Right. We all watched this happen. It is theater, and Zuckerberg won, and everybody loves a winner. That's what happened. And so that's why I'm like, I'm not going to forget who this guy is. I'm not going to forget how fraught this is going to be while I am actively engaging in it, because it is an experience that I frankly missed and find value in terms of communication, both professionally and personally. While I know all too well all of the dangers of these platforms, but that's an excellent metaphor, because that it's spot on. GW seemed quite harmless when we had Trump, and now threats like DeSantis on the table.
Yeah. A lawyer for Twitter, Alex Spiro, sent a letter to Meta accusing the company of engaging in systematic, willful, and unlawful misappropriation of Twitter's trade secrets and other intellectual property. They said Twitter intends to strictly enforce its intellectual property rights and demands that Meta take immediate steps to stop using any Twitter trade secrets or other highly confidential information. I mean, they also accused Zuckerberg of, like, stealing people from Twitter when Musk fired everybody.
That's right. I mean, I literally was just imagining, like, the gorilla just, like, beating its chest, like, show of force. I mean, this is in some ways a game. It's a high stakes game for them. It's also, it's showing their cards. They're spooked. Musk is spooked. Twitter is spooked. I mean, 30 million downloads in 24 hours and just absolutely bleeding out followers and engagement on their platform because of the decisions and changes he made. I mean, this is the consequence of that. So I think that this is a story the media loves. So I don't think it's anywhere near done. They're going to keep feeding the beast on this. And, I can just see Zuckerberg going like this in his office as he writes his shareholders the new numbers every few hours and how gleeful they are. And the whole thing is pretty disgusting and gross. And we're all kind of pawns in it.
He posted a picture of him with his kids. Did you see? With his wife and his kids? But he emojied out the faces of his kids. It's like Zuckerberg won't even put his own children on his own platform because it's not safe. That's what, it's like. I wanted to ask you a very quick kind of aside, which just occurred to me, because, something that these people all have in common, the Zuckerberg and Musk and Bezos, another one holding all the cards and the cash, and Trump and DeSantis, and they're all men.
Sure are.
And I just want to ask you, you know, a little bit of a gendered conversation for a second, but like, as a strong, powerful female who is doing your own little bit to change the world, do you ever think about the fact that it's men that are screwing everything up and typically, traditionally, and historically have done and seem to be continuing to do so? And that, you know, if you look outside of the US, there's women, you know, who are actually far more level-headed and capable, the Angela Merkels of this world, you know, or the former head of New Zealand. I mean, you know, Jacinda Ardern. I mean, because I do think about this myself as a feminist, and I just wondered how you, if it ever occurs to you that actually the common denominator for all of this destruction is testosterone.
There isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about that, Anthony. I don't want to get emotional about it. This is something that I think about all the time. I also want to be clear that there are bad women as well, sure. Or women who don't do right by society or democracy. We were talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene earlier,
about Marjorie, right? Marjorie and Lauren. We just spoke about that. But yes. In the main, it's been a man's world and continues to be.
It certainly has. It certainly has. It is certainly harder for women to start their own businesses, to be elected to public office. There is double standards that have existed forever that have not really lessened over time. I don't think that women get nearly enough credit for surmounting the unique challenges that they face, and women of color have far greater challenges than white women like myself. I have a lot of privilege, and yet, yes. I think about it all the time. There's also a lot of research that women in positions of power and leadership are more effective leaders in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
They are more rational, which is interesting because the meme about women is that they're more emotional. And it's like, just look at Elon Musk and Donald Trump and tell me that they are not emotional and impulsive. And so there's just still so much work to do. I've never found it being very helpful to talk about the gendered side because there's a backlash effect to that. And it's like, oh, you hate all men. Like, men are very defensive right now because women have made some progress. And so my approach personally, because this is a pretty personal question in addition to a global one, is I like to show rather than tell what it looks like to be a woman leader and what it looks like to be a woman in very much a male-dominated world, be it media, politics, what have you. It doesn't really matter. They really all are still very male-dominated. And I think that's important. And one of the things I'm proudest of in my entire career is the number of women who have worked for me, who have gone on to start their own companies and organizations, of which there are over 6 I can count off the top of my head. And it's the thing that gives me the greatest joy, because women have to lift other women up as well, because we can't rely. There aren't enough of you feminists necessarily yet to do it. And so I definitely wish that the media would talk about it as much as they talk about gendered things when it relates to women politicians. I think that they don't talk about it enough, that these are all men, and white men at that.
Okay. We have to finish, but I'm thrilled that we got to have that conversation and the rest of it. And, it's I feel constantly like I want to apologize for being a white male, but I'm obviously that's unrealistic, and I don't, I think the secret is we just have to take responsibility for ourselves. That's right.
Just be a good one.
Right?
Right?
Yeah. Just be a good one. Just be a good one.
We don't want to eliminate you. We want you around. We just want them to be better. And it is always a pleasure to spend time and talk with you, Anthony. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you. That's Tara McGowan. I'm Anthony Davis. Subscribe to my new show, MAGA Uncovered, with Ron Filipkowski. It's Wednesdays on the Midas Media Network. Support me and independent journalism on patreon.com/5Minute News. And join me next week with a brand new special guest and 3 more factual news stories to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with Midas Touch.